It was a normal Tuesday. I had taken the day off work to bring my son in for a doctor visit. I went to the same doctor's office that I had always brought him to. Just as routine, I sat down and waited for him to be called back. There was a selection of books, most of them for kids, sitting on the little desk next to our seats. I reached over and looked through them, deciding to read him a story while he waited. Most were your average kids' books. Then I found a new one I had never seen before. The cover was gone, ripped off by some other careless kid probably months ago. The condition of the book was poor at best. Since I didn't recognize the story, I decided to read it to my son, something new. The cover was gone, as I said, but the first page of the book displayed the title, as well as a cover illustration. The book was called The Funny Foul-Up of the Frantic Falcone. It showed a man, probably in his early 40s, standing in the front of a classroom for kids, probably 5th or 6th graders. The kids in the picture were all shouting and laughing, while Falcone, obviously the teacher, was waving his arms around and trying to quiet them down. The style and quality of the artwork suggested that this would be a run-of-the-mill kids book, like the one I grew up on. Oddly, I couldn't remember ever reading or hearing about this one, so I turned to the first page and began to read. You'll understand soon why I didn't read much past the first page to my son, but I did read the entire book to myself. It opened with an illustration of Mr. Falcone walking up to the school. This is Mr. Falcone, a teacher. He teaches 6th graders. He's been a teacher for a very long time, almost 15 years, and he used to really love teaching kids. Now I found that weird from the start. Why would the book say that he used to love teaching? Doesn't he still? I read on. Nowadays, Mr. Falcone has to teach, even though he doesn't want to anymore. He has had a lot of debt and no family or friends to ever help him. If he doesn't work, the bank will take away his house. Mr. Falcone is sad. Honestly, I thought that this was funny. I figured maybe this was a book to teach kids about the evils of corporate greed or to shine light on the low wages of American education. I turned the page. The next page showed Falcone walking into his classroom. He looked at the chalkboard where someone wrote, "Falcone is a freak." I thought this was a little harsh for a kid's book, but I did stuff like this in 6th grade, so maybe the author was just trying for realism here. The children in Mr. Falcone's class are always telling him how they really feel about him, as they demonstrated on the chalkboard. Poor Mr. Falcone. The next page shows 2 of the kids in Falcone's class, which would turn out to be the only 2 kids shown in the book. They were both drawn in a very real and detailed style. On the surface, they looked like 2 normal kids, but after looking at their faces, I could see the artist put in a lot of time and detail into really highlighting the contempt and hatred these 2 had for Falcone. Meet Charles and Joe. They hate Falcone almost as much as God hates him. At this point, I handed my son a coloring book. I wasn't sure where this particular book was heading, but I didn't need his mind getting warped either. Once it was only my eyes on the page, I read on further. Joe wants to be a dentist when he grows up. As you can see, he brought in some tools to practice with today. The next picture showed Falcone being held down and strapped into a dentist's chair. Joe walked over with what looked like an old-fashioned doctor's bag and took out a pair of pliers and a screwdriver. Time to practice! The next page was one of those hologram-style plastic deals that you could tilt to change the image. It showed Joe ripping out Falcone's teeth. Blood and teeth would fly across the room when you tilted the page. It was very graphic. This was no children's book. Look at all the blood! Guess Joe still has a thing or 2 to learn before he becomes a dentist. He forgot to bring a suction. The next illustration was Falcone staggering towards his desk. Charles steps out in front of him. Charles wants to be a soldier, or maybe a police officer when he grows up. See his combat boots? He shines them every day before class. The following page was Charles kicking Falcone in the crotch. The look of agony on the teacher's face was sickening. Someone put a lot of time into that. The look on Charles's face was pure evil glee. Mr. Falcone teaches lots of lessons, but today, his students teach him a lesson in economics. The illustration accompanying this was of Falcone discovering his paycheck had been ripped to shreds and left on his desk. The next 3 pages are Falcone simply sitting at his desk, his head in his hands, quivering. Tears can be seen forming puddles on his desk. Sharing is important. Charles is about to share one of his favorite devices with Mr. Falcone. Charles is shown holding what appears to be a boxing glove attached to a trigger-activated spring. Hey, Mr. Falcone! Here comes the punch glove! The device fires, and the glove strikes Falcone hard in the face. More blood can be seen, and his nose clearly breaks. The next few pages are torn badly. In one, it appears that the kids are damaging Falcone's car. In another, Falcone can be seen pleading with another adult, maybe the principal. Clearly, it doesn't work, as the next complete page shows him back in the classroom. School is almost over, so Mr. Falcone reaches for one of his few pleasures, his cigarettes. Uh-oh. Looks like Charles and Joe wanted to show Mr. Falcone that smoking is bad for you. This page shows Falcone holding up a pack of cigarettes which are dripping with water. Ruined. The next page is Falcone taking the bus home. The page after that shows Falcone running home to find that his house has been foreclosed. On the second to last page, the illustration of Falcone is looking directly at the reader. His eyes are bloodshot. He's bruised and bloodied. Only one thing left to do. Written across the bottom. The final page shows Falcone blowing his brains out. I threw the book into the trash. No child should accidentally pick that up and read such a horrible story. Clearly, this was somebody's morbid idea. After my son finished his appointment, I fished out the book and decided to see if I could find out who wrote it or published it. There was no author's name given, but I did find the address of the publishing company. I wrote them a strong letter expressing how their book, clearly meant for adults but written and illustrated in the style of a children's book, had found its way into a pediatrician's office. I never received a response, and as far as I can tell, the publishing company doesn't exist. I still wonder what their inspiration or intent was behind publishing such a story. Furthermore, how many more books did they publish? And what lessons did those books try to teach?